There is a moment, and you have lived it, when something hits you so hard that the air leaves your chest before your mind even understands what happened. A word, a rejection, a silence where there should have been love. And in that moment, you realize with terrifying clarity how exposed you truly are. You built your life on ground you never owned. Most people respond to that exposure the same way they build walls. They go quiet, they go cold, they stop trusting. But walls are not strength, they are just pain-wearing armor. The Stoics understood something far more dangerous and far more liberating. The threat was never outside you. It was always the relationship you had with what was outside you. The Stoics were not monks who retreated from the world. Marcus Aurelius commanded armies, buried children, governed millions, and was betrayed by people he trusted. Yet the journals he left behind, written for no audience but himself, radiate a stillness that feels almost impossible given what he endured. What was his secret? He trained himself every single day to see clearly. This video is not about becoming emotionless. Numbness is not a philosophy, it is a wound. What we are building here is something rarer, a mind that can feel everything and be controlled by nothing. Every concept in this video is a tool, forged in ancient fire and sharpened for the modern world. Use even one of them and your life will quietly begin to change. We begin with the most foundational Stoic insight of all, the one that changes everything the moment you truly absorb it. Epictetus, a man who began his life as a slave, said it plainly: some things are in our power and some things are not. That division, that ruthless sorting of the world into what you control and what you do not, is the first wall of the fortress. Everything else is built on this. Think about the last time you suffered. Really suffered, the kind that kept you awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling. Now ask yourself honestly, how much of that suffering came from the event itself, and how much came from your insistence that the event should not have happened? The Stoics would say almost all of it came from the second thing. The event was already over. You kept it alive. This is not blame. This is power. Because if your suffering is mostly generated by your judgment about events rather than the events themselves, then you have far more control over your pain than you have ever been told. The Stoics called this the discipline of assent, the practice of pausing between the stimulus and your agreement with the story it tells you. That pause is where your freedom lives. Here's the first practical habit, the one you can begin tonight. When something disturbs you, an insult, a disappointment, a fear, do not immediately react. Instead, say to yourself, this is a thing that has happened. My opinion of it has not happened yet. You are not suppressing the feeling. You are refusing to let the feeling write its own verdict before you have examined it. This is not weakness. This is the most precise kind of strength. The second Stoic insight cuts even deeper. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. He did not write this as inspiration. He wrote it as a reminder to himself on a day when the empire was crumbling and people he loved were dying. He wrote it because it was the thing he most needed to hear and most struggled to believe. That is how hard this work is, and that is how necessary it is. There is something almost sacred about the fact that the most powerful man in the ancient world had to remind himself of these truths every single morning. It means you are not weak for struggling with this. It means this work is simply what it costs to be a human being who refuses to be enslaved by circumstance. And the cost, paid daily, is worth every moment of discomfort it demands. Now we move to the habit that most people resist the hardest, because it sounds like surrender when it is actually the opposite. The Stoics called it amor fati, love of fate. Not acceptance of fate, not tolerance of fate. Love. The active, deliberate turning toward what has happened and choosing to see it as exactly what was needed. This is not passive. This is the most aggressive act of will a human being can perform. When you lose something, a relationship, a position, a version of yourself you thought was permanent, the instinct is to mourn the gap between what is and what you wanted. Amor Fati says something radical. What if there is no gap? What if this exact moment, this exact loss, is the precise material you need to build the next version of yourself? The grief is real. But the story you tell about the grief is where your power either lives or dies. The practical application of Amor Fati is deceptively simple. Every evening, take one thing from your day that you resisted an outcome you did not want, a moment that frustrated you, and write a single sentence about what it gave you rather than what it took. Not a forced positive spin. A genuine question. What was forged here that could not have been forged in comfort? Do this for 30 days. The mind begins to rewire itself toward resilience instead of resentment. Here is where many people misunderstand Stoicism. They think it demands that you feel nothing, that you watch your world burn with a polite nod. But Epictetus, Marcus, Seneca, all of them grieved, all of them felt fear. All of them knew the weight of love. What they refused was to let those feelings become their commander. Feel the rain. Do not drown in it. That distinction is everything. We are now at the threshold of the most psychologically powerful Stoic practice, the premeditation of adversity. The Romans called it premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Every morning, before the day begins, you deliberately imagine what could go wrong, not to invite disaster, not to spiral into anxiety, but to rob the disaster of its greatest weapon, surprise. What you have already faced in your mind cannot ambush you. This practice sounds morbid to the modern ear because we have been sold the idea that optimism means only imagining good outcomes. But optimism built on the refusal to see reality is not strength, it is a blindfold. The Stoic morning practice of imagining difficulty is an act of radical honesty, and radical honesty is the only foundation on which genuine calm can be built. You cannot be unshaken by what you have already shaken hands with. Try this tomorrow morning. Before you check your phone, before you speak to anyone, sit for 5 minutes and ask, what is the worst thing that could happen today? Then ask, if it did happen, what would I do? Not obsess. Not catastrophes. Simply plan. The mind that has a plan is a mind that cannot be paralyzed. And a mind that cannot be paralyzed is, by definition, free. Now consider the role other people play in your emotional life, because this is where most people bleed the most. Someone criticizes you and it ruins your day. Someone ignores you and you build an entire story about your worth. Someone leaves and you feel like the floor has disappeared. The Stoics had a surgical answer for this. You gave them that power, which means you can take it back. Marcus Aurelius wrote, I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others. He saw the absurdity clearly. You would not let a stranger walk into your house and rearrange your furniture. Yet you let strangers rearrange your entire inner world with a single sentence. This is the wound, and awareness of the wound is the beginning of its healing. The habit that breaks this pattern is what the Stoics called the view from above, the practice of mentally zooming out until the thing that wounded you becomes proportionate. Someone said something cruel about you at work. In the view from above, you see yourself, the office, the city, the continent, the spinning planet, the incomprehensible vastness of time. Not to make your pain feel worthless, but to make the source of your pain feel accurately small. We are now halfway through this architecture of the untouchable mind, and it is worth pausing to name what we are actually building. We are not building indifference. We are not building arrogance. We are building what the Stoics called apatheia, a word that has been badly translated as apathy, but which actually means freedom from being governed by your passions. Not the absence of feeling, the mastery of it. That is a different thing entirely. Consider anger, because anger is the emotion that most reliably destroys the people it inhabits. Seneca wrote an entire treatise on anger, and his conclusion was devastating. Anger always punishes itself. Every time you let rage govern you, you are not striking back at the world. You are detonating a bomb inside your own chest and calling it justice. The world barely flinches. You carry the shrapnel. The Stoic practice for anger is one of the most practical things in this entire video. When you feel anger rising, do not express it immediately and do not suppress it completely. Instead, delay it. Tell yourself, I will feel this fully in 1 hour. What you will discover almost every time is that in 1 hour the anger has lost most of its authority. You did not fight it. You simply refused to give it the urgency it demanded. Now we turn to the most intimate form of suffering, the fear of loss. Not loss that has already happened, but the terror of loss that might happen, the constant low hum of anxiety about the people and things you love. This fear is perhaps the most human thing there is. And the Stoic answer to it is not to love less. It is to hold what you love with open hands. Marcus Aurelius lost several children. He wrote about it with a grief that is raw even across 2,000 years. But he returned, always, to the same practice. When you love something, remind yourself that it is borrowed. Not to love it less, but to love it more completely, in the present moment, without the fog of assuming it will always be there. Borrowed things are held with more reverence than owned things. That is the gift the Stoics offer. Here is the practice. Tonight, look at someone you love and say to yourself, silently, this person is mortal. This moment is unrepeatable. I am choosing to be fully here. You will feel something shift, a sudden sharpness to the ordinary, a tenderness that does not need the future to justify it. That sharpness is not morbid. That sharpness is what it feels like to be truly alive in the present instead of half alive in the anxiety of tomorrow. The Stoics also understood something about identity that modern psychology is only beginning to catch up with. Most of your suffering is caused not by events, but by the story of who you are that those events seem to threaten. Someone humiliates you, and the pain is not really about their words. It's about what their words imply about your worth. Strip the implication away, and you strip most of the pain away with it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, how much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it? He knew that the sting of an insult lasts only a moment if you do not build a palace around it. The practice here is identity decoupling, the deliberate habit of separating what happens to you from who you are. You are not your reputation. You are not your failures. You are not the worst thing anyone ever said about you. You are the observer. The observer is untouchable. We need to talk about what happens in the dark, the 3 a.m. hours when the mind turns against itself, when every fear becomes a certainty and every wound reopens. This is the territory the Stoics mapped with extraordinary precision because they knew that philosophy is not just for sunlit afternoons. It is emergency equipment. It is what you reach for when everything else has failed. Epictetus taught his students to practice what he called the returning of focus, the act of recognizing, in the middle of a mental spiral, that you have left what is real and entered the theater of imagination. He said, name what is actually happening right now, in this room, in this body. Not what might happen. Not what someone might be thinking. What is? The present moment, examined honestly, almost never contains what the anxious mind insists is there. The habit is this. When the spiral begins, Say the words out loud if you can. I am in the present moment. Name 5 things that are real right now. The floor under your feet. The sound of rain. The temperature of the air. You are not meditating. You are not performing wellness. You are using the ancient Stoic technique of grounding attention in the actual, because the actual is where your power is. The imaginary future is where your power goes to die. Now we arrive at the Stoic insight that most people find the most confronting, the one that separates those who read philosophy from those who are transformed by it. Your character, not your circumstances, not your reputation, not your relationships. Your character is the only thing that is truly yours. Everything else can be taken. Character cannot be taken. It can only be abandoned. And you are the only one who can abandon it. This is why the Stoics were not broken by failure, betrayal, or loss in the way most people are. They had located their value in something that circumstances could not reach. When Marcus was betrayed by a general he trusted, he did not collapse because his self-worth was not stored in being trusted. It was stored in how he responded to betrayal. That distinction, storing your worth in your response rather than the outcome, is perhaps the most powerful mindset shift in this entire video. There is a habit that builds this mindset shift directly into your daily life, and it is disarmingly simple. Every time something goes wrong, and something will go wrong today, ask not, why did this happen to me? But what does the best version of me do next? Not tomorrow. Not when conditions improve. Next. The question redirects your attention from the uncontrollable past to the controllable present, and that redirection, practiced enough, becomes automatic. We must speak about ego, because ego is the thing that makes you touchable more than anything else. The ego is not your confidence, it is the part of you that needs the world to confirm what it already believes about itself. And because the world is indifferent, it will never confirm enough. Every slight becomes an attack. Every success becomes a debt that must be repaid with more success. The ego is a machine that runs on hunger and can never be fed. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself with a ferocity that is almost startling. You have seen those things. Look also at these. Do not disturb yourself by picturing your life as a whole. Do not assemble in your mind the many and varied troubles which have come to you in the past and will come again in the future, but ask yourself, with regard to every present difficulty, what is there in this that is intolerable and beyond endurance? He was dismantling his own ego's catastrophizing in real time. He was doing it by making the problem smaller and the self bigger. The practice of ego dissolution is not about self-deprecation. It is about releasing your grip on how you appear to others and tightening your grip on who you actually are. Begin with this. Stop explaining yourself to people who have decided not to understand you. Every explanation is a negotiation for your worth. The Stoic does not negotiate their worth. They simply live it, quietly, without an audience. We are near the end of this architecture now. And there is one final insight that binds everything together, the one that transforms all these individual habits from techniques into a way of being. The Stoics believed that virtue, the committed practice of wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, was not a means to a good life. It was the good life itself, not a path to happiness. Happiness was the byproduct of walking the path correctly. This means that you do not need the world to cooperate for your life to have meaning. You do not need to win, to be loved by everyone, to avoid loss, to escape pain. You need only to meet each moment with the full force of your character. That is a standard you can always meet. That is a game you can never lose if you choose to play it. And that realization, truly felt, not just understood, is what it means to be emotionally untouchable. So here's what the untouchable mind looks like in practice, assembled from everything we have built today. It does not react before it is examined. It does not store its worth in outcomes. It cannot control. It does not give strangers the keys to its interior world. It holds what it loves with open hands. It meets the morning with the honest question, what might go wrong and who will I be when it does? It does not need the world's applause to know its own value. This is not a destination you arrive at. It is a direction you choose every morning when you open your eyes. Some mornings you will choose it easily. Some mornings you will fail before you have even gotten out of bed. That is not weakness. That is the human condition. What separates the Stoic from the person who suffers without meaning is not that the Stoic never falls. It is that the Stoic has built a philosophy that makes falling forward possible. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, wrote his philosophy in private notes never intended to be seen. He was not performing wisdom. He was practicing it imperfectly, daily, until the last day of his life. If you take nothing else from this video, take that. The work is private. The work is imperfect. The work is the point. And the work begins not someday, not when you feel ready, but in the next moment you are given the choice between reacting and observing. If this video gave you one thing, one habit, one shift, one moment of recognition, then share it with someone who is suffering the way you used to suffer, or the way you are suffering right now. These ideas have survived 2,000 years because they were. And if you want to go deeper into this architecture of the unbreakable mind, stay close to this channel. There is much more to build together. The Stoics did not stop at one lesson. Neither will we.